Oh.
I haven't got any ideas. Oh no. Justin, find something. I put this on thinking, oh, that'll be enough, that's content. I mean, I just grabbed it from the closet. There's no, hey, bring that. I don't want that. Bring that one. I don't want that. I'm bored of that one now. Anyway, let's talk about the game industry. Joe, do you remember Golden Axe? Bomb, 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 bomb. Ah! There is someone else here. Wait, otherwise they'll think something's gone really wrong. See, I've not.
The original Golden Axe is a game I have endlessly fond memories of. My family and I aren't particularly close, but my brother and I would play this and Streets of Rage together constantly, seeing as they were both packed onto a 6-games-in-1 Mega Drive cartridge that also included The Revenge of Shinobi, that fucking game with fucking Spider-Man as a fucking boss, just cause Sega had the fucking rights. It's a pretty good game. Sure, many will tell you that later installments in both the Golden Axe and Streets of Rage series were better, but were they on a 6-in-1 Mega Drive cartridge that offered half a dozen escapes from reality for some very poor children? No. This is why Golden Axe is the best Mega Drive game, along with Streets of Rage, Revenge of Shinobi, and whatever other stupid cheap shit was on the thing. Naturally, the idea of Sega releasing a free prototype of a long-cancelled Golden Axe game caught my attention this week. While only a level long, the 2.5D reboot of the hack-em-up classic looks really nice. And let's face it, it's video game history, as well as the result of somebody's hard work. That's plenty worth tossing out there for free, especially in a market that doesn't value archival. Plus, the release is called Golden Axe, which is some damn fine wordplay that totally won't take on a darker meaning later. At the beginning of this decade, the prototype Steam listing explains, Sega Studios Australia was working on a series of reboots of classic Sega IP, known collectively as the Sega Reborn series. These included 2.5D reboots of Golden Axe, Altered Beast and Streets of Rage, as well as an endless runner version of Shinobi, all encompassed in a universal hub world. Sadly, Sega Studios Australia's doors were shuttered in 2013, and with it the Sega Reborn project was lost to the annals of video game history. Until now! Golden Axe is part of this past weekend's unique digital offerings from Sega to the wider world. This is in celebration of the legendary company's 60-year anniversary, and joins such releases as Streets of Kamurocho, a Yakuza Streets of Rage mashup, and a Sonic the Hedgehog character skin in Fall Guys, as well as a bunch of discounts. It's all very exciting, and probably wholesome, and everything in the script so far isn't leading to me talking about industry abuse again. Originally, the Steam store page attempted to curb expectations for the prototype, describing its unfinished nature by stating it may be janky, may be buggy, may be an artifact of its time. Weirdly, however, the store listing no longer features that disclaimer, no longer says it's janky or buggy or an artifact. There's no seeming reason for this, other than the fact that everything in the script so far has been leading to me talking about industry abuse again, because Cheech and Chong up in smoke, would you believe it? Turns out abusive crunch and oppressive workplace conditions were fueling development at the sadly shuttered Sega Studio Australia. While Sega claims it reached out to some of the original development team to bring this dusty gem to light, not everyone who broke themselves for this game were informed. One such person was developer Tim Dawson, who didn't find out about the release until it was already in news headlines. And considering his experience on the project was crunchy hell, he ain't too pleased. Woke up to the surprising news that Sega is releasing the Golden Axe prototype I coded in 2012 under crunch conditions. Dawson tweeted the day after the news broke. At least I'm not alone. This appears to be a surprise to everyone I know who actually worked on it. In the lengthy thread that followed, Dawson recounted the hellish experience he had working on Golden Axe, or so it's now known. as a cleverly titled prototype pun that Sega has since apologised for, since it came off as fucking insensitive after what Dawson had to say, and what he had to say wasn't particularly glowing. According to the history that you won't find on the Steam page, Dawson and designer Sanatana Mishra were approached by a Sega executive to prototype a rebooted Golden Axe, with the promise that they'd get to make it their way, albeit with the condition that the reboot should be darker and bloodier than the originals. The team attempted to bridge both the classic series and the reboot, trying to marry the atmosphere of the Genesis trilogy to a gorier atmosphere. This would have been a difficult line to walk at any time, but we had 2 weeks and no time to iterate, so we made do. Just really attacked the design knowing we wouldn't be able to course correct much, but luckily we had a talented team of artists, animators and sound designers, Dawson explained. Much less luckily, we also had the lead designer, who thought he was designing it. And sometimes Mishra would have to physically block him from reaching my workstation, or he'd start explaining insights he'd received playing the mobile port on the train on the way to work. This lead designer was a significant cause of problems. He would arbitrarily demand things of staff regardless of what projects they were supposed to be working on. In one example, telling Dawson to work on attack animations when he was supposed to be coding AI. On top of that, and with the staff already spread thin, this very intelligent leader wanted to start making the Streets of Rage reboot at the same time, not realising the 2 games would need to be different. By this point, Dawson says he was working 14-hour days, but the biggest problem came when he finally had something to show. I showed the game, he recounted. Grave faces. There was a pause. Where's the wow factor, someone asked. The lead designer once again complained it wasn't a God of War-like 3D brawler like he wanted. Someone said maybe it'd have been better to have made a pre-rendered video where the barbarian fought a monster. I experienced a moment of clarity. Either they couldn't see what was in front of them, or wanted me to feel bad because it's the only way they knew how to manage. I was the guy who makes playable prototypes. I had over-delivered, and if they didn't want that, they had screwed up. Dawson and Mishra concluded they'd brush off management and work on their prototype regardless. Effects and polish was added, more sounds implemented, combat timings sped up, and input windows widened to make combos executive-friendly. The finished build was revealed, and the same management team that nagged me earlier lined up to tell me how good it was now. At that point, however, Dawson said he felt dead inside. The 7-day work weeks, the negging from leadership, and the praise for his final prototype, which never saw the light of day until now, had convinced him management didn't know what they were doing.
So obviously, before this video went out, I had a play of Golden Axed. And it's pretty, I mean, when you consider it was a prototype cobbled together in, you know, like 2 weeks and that, it's really quite good. Like, I can imagine if the prototype was shit, what Dawson was talking about might come off as arrogant, as an artist not listening to critique. But it's not shit, is the thing. It's not shit. I also think at one point, a character died and got skewered on a bit of a bridge. It could have just been a visual glitch, but it looked really cool. So if you make this a real game, Sega, which you won't, do a bridge kill, like just skewered on a thing. It's, I mean, for a prototype, it's really fucking good. And feels like Golden Axe. So, you know, good.
Oh.
The stories surrounding this game's development, the long hours, the lack of weekends, all point to the failures of management, a lead designer making arbitrary demands, a desire for more and bigger content in the face of unreasonable deadlines, executives getting involved to dictate artistic direction. All of this is consistent with so many of the crunch stories we've heard over the past few years and beyond, to the point where it's pretty much a universal given that crunch is a direct result of idiots at the top making things difficult for the people putting in most of the work at the bottom. As I've repeatedly stated, crunch isn't a triumph of the workforce but a failure of the management. Whether we're talking about BioWare, Telltale, NetherRealm, Epic Games, CDPR, or any other of the numerous companies destroying their talent, it all comes down to those few insensitive and clueless dipshits making plans without decisions and decisions without a plan. And so you can imagine how the developers who endured sleepless nights and endless amounts of stress might feel to see their work jokingly referred to as Golden Axed and described as an old janky mess. As Tim Dawson put it, go fuck yourself, Parasites. Now let's talk a little bit more about that parasitism. That's one of them words that I've written a lot but never said out loud all that much. Parasitism. Anyway, let's talk about that for a minute. I've likened video game publishers to parasites before, as well as worms, locusts, vampires, money launderers, pools of scummy pond water, drug dealers from 80s style PSA videos, Cyril Sneer, the Tolosh from the Ancestral Trail. Hell, sometimes I even insult them by calling them video game publishers. The Golden Axe story, however, not only points to what a bloodsucker the mainstream industry is, how it takes from talent without giving back, but also the sheer entitlement to that bloodsuckery. Indeed, Sega felt entitled to not only release the results of physically and mentally dangerous workloads, it felt entitled to make fun of how bad it felt the game was, and to make light of the fact it was cancelled. This would have been fine if the hard work had been credited, if those most impacted by the crunch had actually been reached out to. More importantly, it would have been fine if the game hadn't been managed in such a shockingly abysmal way, if it hadn't, you know, fucking tore the guts out of the creatives who worked on it. Dawson programmed the entire thing from scratch and I was in charge of design, so when they say they reached out to the team that made it, I don't really know who that means. This is what Mishra had to say on the release, creating further questions as to who Sega actually worked with on this Golden Axe to release. This is the result of an industry that places brands over people. It's an industry where talent doesn't get the credit it's due and routinely finds its name intentionally left off the credits of games. Any significantly big-name game director largely gets squeezed out of the industry to work in the indie or mid-tier space, and even then, they get almost all the credit for what they make despite heading up massive teams. Faces and names are in short supply in the game industry. We know more about the executives and the CEOs on the whole than we do about the people putting in the graft. We've talked about the problem with credit in an earlier episode and how it easily facilitates abuse by keeping the victims faceless and voiceless. It goes without saying that without a social media platform to share and see the information distributed, we would not be talking about this. We'd have had the initial excited news about the prototype release and left it at that. But for all the fucking vileness social media has given us, and it has given us plenty, it at least gives more of a voice to the voiceless and offers at least a shot at getting heard. The AAA industry would prefer to keep its talent stripped of vocality. It's why so many are afraid to speak without the condition of anonymity, because you can so easily be blacklisted by game companies for daring to tell the truth. Sega has since apologised for its callous representation of the prototype. "We certainly didn't mean to dredge up painful memories for Mr. Dawson and his former colleagues or appear disrespectful," Sega offered. "We've removed the line from the Steam copy that could have been taken as a slur on the development and would like to reassure everyone that it was intended as a comment on the build we had ported to PC, not the quality of the original work." I think it's telling that Sega has only apologised for dredging up bad memories and not for the memories being there in the first place, which again speaks to a common trend in the game industry, fixing only the surface level problems while calculatedly not taking responsibility for the underlying root causes. We've seen this with many mealy-mouthed crunch apologies, with the quiet and shady way in which Ubisoft has handled its sexual abuse scandals, and we certainly see it in certain studios his absolute refusal to engage with any of their many allegations in good faith. It's a common problem that has woven itself through pretty much everything the Jimquisition has talked about for 10 years. This is an industry that will never take responsibility for the evil shit it does. To AAA publishers, accountability is poison. And this is compounded by the disturbing willingness to accept these days that brands make our content and not people. That a game studio is its logo first and foremost, and every human being stood in the shadow of that logo is completely expendable. Not just from publishers, but from several sectors of game journalism and, seemingly, the overwhelming majority of the game-buying public who either don't follow the industry enough to ever see these stories, or, in the case of the hardcore gamers TM I've been dealing with lately, do know everything that's happened, but simply don't give a fuck. Lately I've been receiving a significant backlash for criticising CD Projekt Red over its grueling crunch practices, while journalist Jason Schreier has been accused of having an agenda or outright lying, despite the stories, which I personally will say I can back up based on what I've heard from inside CDPR, not only being believable, but joined by multiple similar allegations going back years. The CDPR shit ain't new. The backlash I faced comes from self-styled game-loving consumers who claim to love video games but show nothing other than absolute contempt for the people who make them. They want their products to be of high quality without delay, delivered ASAP and pandering to their every whim. Then when some of us point out that what they wanted was made by harming the people who made it, when we suggest that you don't actually need a AAA game immediately and they should be delayed as long as it takes to make them healthily, when some of us point out that these corporations are so big and so rich that they could actually afford to hire more full-timers rather than bring people in, work them to the bone and then jettison them, when we suggest that bullying, intimidation, harassment, assault, abuse overall shouldn't be prevalent in the game industry, we are slandered, buried and ignored. It's no wonder so many developers are terrified of speaking up, which seems to be what publishers and a large subset of gamers want. I mean, we already know that there's a significant portion of particularly harassy gamers that work towards that very end, claiming to be speaking up for the consumers, while in actual fact doing the dirty work of big mainstream game publishers. For free! As corporate cheerleaders! I mean, it's a little bit pitiful. In essence, there is no difference in thinking between a suitably self-centered hardcore gamer and an executive at Electronic Arts. Hashtag not all gamers. If you don't feel what I'm saying applies to you, you don't need to get offended, but those of you to whom this does apply, you'll want the same thing. Self-styled consumer, game publisher. If you have this dehumanizing attitude toward game dev, you will want the same thing. Because if you're defending any company such as, oh I don't know, CDPR the brand without giving a shit about CDPR the people, you might as well change your name to Bobby Kotick Jr. In fact, you've heard the stories, you know this all goes back years, and you're not interested in getting to the bottom of it because you want the product delivered on time? Well, go apply for an executive job at fucking Ubisoft, why don't ya? We need to fucking care. We need to care consistently, not cheerfully critique the EAs and Activisions without giving a shit across the board, because that won't fix anything. Until developers have an official voice, until there's maybe some organisation, or I don't know, until enough people give an actual shit. This Golden Axe story will continue to not be all that unique at heart. Despite how unusual this situation is mechanically, what headline grabbers all these faux pas around the Golden Axe prototype are, the story is still the same. Bad leadership, a lack of regard for the feelings and agency of the developers, and an overwhelming sense of parasitic entitlement. Blep, blep, blep.
Anyway, Sega, it's not your job to crush the souls of developers by telling them their game is shit. That's my job. In all seriousness, and you might not believe it, despite my reputation as someone who loves hating games, it's something I've always considered and worried about, is when I go in harsh on a game. People did still work really hard on it. Even the creatively lazy ones, it still took some graft to make the thing. These are not little mom and pop shops. You've always got to remember that. These are big corporations. They can afford to hire more people. They can afford to push things back. They don't want it. They don't want to upset the shareholders. They don't want to upset the people they promised that they'll have this game out here at this time. The promises themselves, of course, being unreasonable. Because they will ask a developer, can you do this? And they will say, ha 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 ha, fucking no. And then the publisher says, fucking yes. And then that's how games get made. And anyway, right? Video games are shit. They're not even worth anyone crunching. They're not worth anyone being put through stress. There'll be a lot of people out there who will say, like, you know, no video game is worth crunching developers. I say no video game is worth. That's right, I'm a baddie now. Thank God for me.